let's talk a little defense here, Shaun, is this kind of the second part of this team factor, because this is a really fascinating conversation because the defense is so good that it's just we can kind of assume that they're going to, be really good. But I do think there are some players that need to step up if this defense is going to actually take a big leap, because I have a very a take that I don't know a lot of people are going to agree with. I don't think the defense was as good last year as it should have been or could have been. And the reason it comes down to is simple. It was injuries. I think the injuries that this team suffered, and then also with Jason Onye being off the team, you were never going to reach your peak as a defense. When you lost Boubacar, when you lost Patojo, when you lost Onye, when you lost Benjamin Morrison, and then, of course, once you lost Riley Mills in the playoff, you were never going to be that elite shutdown defense, but they were still statistically pretty good, in large part because they just didn't play very good offenses last year, even in the playoffs. I don't think neither Georgia nor Penn State had elite scoring offenses. I mean, Penn State had good numbers last year, but I mean, let's be honest, that offense wasn't exactly lighting the world on fire whenever they played a team with a pulse. And like, they weren't bad, but like, they didn't do a whole lot against Illinois. They had scored 21 points and had 74 yards. Scored 27 points against UCLA. Scored 28 points against Wisconsin. Had only 270 yards of offense against Ohio State. Then they ripped up a lot of bad teams and scored a bunch on Oregon, who we saw in the playoff, also had a pretty bad defense. But their offense didn't actually do a whole lot against SMU. They just kept turning the ball over. SMU did. I mean, Penn State only had 325 yards, only averaged 5 yards a play in that game. Averaged 5.9 yards per play against Boise State. And it wasn't like this really super impressive performance, in my opinion. And everybody talks about how Notre Dame's offense needs to get better. I would argue that Penn State's was worse in the playoffs than Notre Dame's was. This year's going to be different. You're going to play some good offenses this year. But I also think the defense is poised to get to its full potential, because it's hard for me to believe that they're going to reach that level of key injuries the way they did last year. You just don't often see that 2 years in a row. Barring that happening, I think that defense last year would have been a lot better without the injuries. So this isn't like now that Al Golden's gone, his defense wasn't really that good. I think he did a phenomenal job considering what they'd lost. It's just that if you really stack it up, it wasn't an elite defense. Like in with context of, if they had to face a different schedule of better offensive teams, I think they would have had some games where they struggled a little bit more. This team is healthier and deeper, in my opinion. Having said that, if this defense is going to realize its full potential of being a top 5 caliber, championship caliber defense, I think there's some very, very important breakouts that have to happen. Shaun, and I'm going to let you kick this off as I kind of set this up, because we're going to spend some time on one position for a little bit, and I'll let you kick it off, because I think we're on the same page on this one for sure.
Yeah, in totality, for multiple reasons. I think the interior of the defensive line, and then we're going to talk about pass rush as well. But the interior of the defensive line, I think we've done multiple shows where we chronicled what championship teams give up on the ground on average. And it sits right around 96 yards per game on the ground. Most championship teams, that's what they do defensively. And so Notre Dame has been, chopping at wood, per se, trying to get that down. And if they can get that down under 100 per game, that would be fantastic. And that would talk about the improvement of the interior of the defensive line. Injuries, like you said, played a major part in that. And then losing Jason Onye for the reasons that we don't need to get into. But now the addition of Elijah Harris, then you get Jared Dawson, and then you get some of the guys that are developed, Davion Dixon, Sean Sevillano. You get Donovan Heinisch coming back. Gabriel Rubio. Now you're talking about going 3 to 4 guys deep when it talks about 2 men, and that's great depth to have at that position. And now you start to wear on the other team, and you start to take less reps away from top guys because now they're able to be strong in the late third, fourth quarter part of the game. So that's going to be vitally important. But that also, with that, be part of the pass pressure and pass rush as well. I think Jared Dawson specifically is going to add that. I think Jason Onye is going to add that. And then I forgot to mention Armel Mukam, who we expect to take a step forward as well. Those are things, those small incremental changes and improvements go a long way. Just listening to you talk, now I look back in retrospect and I ask myself, what else was Al Golden going to do? Why did he fire and activate his linebackers so much up the middle? He was forced to do that because of injury and because of the guys that he had to play. You're playing a guy, Donovan Heinrich, that might be 280, 285. You're not going to ask him to sit there, anchor, and take on double teams. And you want him to get into a gap, get upfield, and then you try to bring a linebacker off of him and create tackles for loss and shut lanes down and make it hard for the offense to find a gap to run in. That's what you have to do. And so I think, like you said, Al Golden did an incredible job looking at the situation, taking the situation he had, and being able to call what he needed to call. Some question whether or not he might have pulled back or needed to pull back. And Notre Dame just didn't show up and play their football in the first half.
Right.
They just didn't play their game. It's as simple as that. We could sit here and armchair quarterback it, all day. But that interior of the defensive line for me, Brian, because I know we're going to get to the exterior and the pass rush.
I agree. I think you got to start
that free, because now
you got to start up the middle. You got to be strong up the middle.
It's almost like having a big man, but you don't have a guard he can play with.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I got this big dude down low that can dominate, but who's going to get him the ball, right? And so the interior of the defensive line has to get the ball to the talented linebacker core. They're talented. They're the ones that can make plays, wreak havoc in the run game, wreak havoc in the passing game, rush the passer when you need them to rush the passer. If they can be set up by the interior of the defensive line, you're going to see Drake Bowen take off. You're going to see KVA take off. You're going to see Jaden Osbury take off. You're going to see the rest, Preston Zinter, Madden for Rain. You're going to see that entire group take off. And it goes to and is linked to the interior of that defensive line, in my opinion.
I think there's always a game that pops in my head when we're having this conversation. And it's the Pitt game 2012. And I was at that game because that year, remember, I was coaching in 2012 and 2013. So I was kind of a fan, and we had a bye week that week, and my wife bought me tickets to go to the game with her parents. So we're at that game, and I just remember the first half, Shaun, because remember, they didn't play Lewis Nix in the first half. And they're just getting to Manti, just chopping him, just cutting Manti. He can't get, he's just flying to the ball, and they're free releasing to the second level and just chopping him. Just Pitt's up 17, I think 17-6. They're just all over Manti. And then second half, they put Lewis Nix back in there, and all of a sudden, Manti is just flying to the ball and making play after play after play. Because the reality is, I don't care how good you are linebacker. If what's going on in front of you is not allowing you to play your game, then you're not going to be successful. 100% agree with that statement. I'll go more specific. I think they need at least one player at D tackle. I think they need one guy to break out as a difference maker. Like, you don't necessarily have to be Riley Mills from last year, but if you can at least be Howard Cross from 2 years ago, who I think Riley last year was better than Howard 2 years ago, but both were really good players. You need at least one type of breakout like that. Well, I don't know if they have a guy like that. Well, did you think it was going to be Howard Cross in 2023? Probably not. So I think they need at least one, and then they need another guy to kind of step up in at least one area, whether it be Gabriel Rubio stepping up as a dominant run defender or somebody else stepping up as a dominant pass rusher. Because the biggest thing that they missed when Riley went out in the playoffs was they just didn't have that up the middle pass rushing presence anymore. And they had to ask Drake to do it from second level pressures, and he was just missing. Does some of those throws in Ohio State get off if it's a 6'5" guy getting in your face with getting his arms up in that situation? I don't know. So I think that's something that I want to see. I think you need at least one guy to break out as a dude, and at least one other player to break out as sort of even if it's just in one of the two dimensions that you're a really good player. I think they need that. And then on the outside too, Shaun, is I don't expect their D tackles, no matter what, to be as dominant from a disruption standpoint as they were last year. If it happens, that's awesome. But I just don't expect it. Notre Dame, I think, ranked in the top. I had one person tell me they led the nation. I had somebody else tell me they were top 5. But as far as total pressures from the interior of the defensive line, Notre Dame was one of the best in the country last year. I don't expect them to do that again this year. But I expect them to be better against the run, to your point. Where I want to see some of the pressure come from is off the edge. That's where I think Chris Ash wants to and needs to get more dominance on the D-line is on the edge. And at least as a pass rusher alone, if not a two-way player, they need one of, if not two, of Bryce Young. But I think one will do enough. Bryce Young, Boubacar Traore, Josh Burnham, Logan Thomas, Junior Tuilamaka. One of those guys has to step up as a legitimate force when other team throws the football. If more than one breaks out, then this team is going to be really good. Because if one is just consistently really good, then other weeks it's this guy does well, that guy does well, that type of thing. But I also think, Shaun, you need at least one of them to be like a difference maker, like a Foskey type of production on a per snap basis as what is off the edge. I think you absolutely need that.
For me, I think that defensive end situation, you've kind of talked me off the ledge. Because I was thinking about it over the summer, and I'm like, man, I'm worried about this pass rush. I'm looking at, can we depend? I don't want to have to depend on the two guys that are coming back from injury. If I can just have them be ready to go second half of the season and really peeking into the playoffs, now I'm like, okay, we're good. So now you talk about Bryce Young needing to take a step forward. But remember, we did a show and we really said, let's put to numbers. What is improvement for Bryce Young, realistically? Like, could he explode? All right, he could. But we were both like, if he can get 5 to 6 sacks with some tackles for loss and a certain amount of pressures, that's improvement. And so if you get that from him and you get the two guys returning and Botello and Boubacar Traore to go ahead and show that they can get back to the form that they had at the beginning of last year. And then, the guys that, look, Junior Tuilamaka was clutch in that playoff run. And I think he's going to get even better because this is really going to be his second full year being at that position. So now I expect him to be even better. And Josh Burnham, I think, let me tell you something that I'm not thinking about this. I remember the first time I saw Josh Burnham, I think he might have been 230 when he showed up to Notre Dame. Maybe he was so small, man, and they put him in. And I remember saying, yo, this kid has an incredible first step. And then he added the weight, and he added it quickly. Remember we saw him, you guys saw him at Syracuse, and you were like, yo, this kid has been in the weight room. That was like literally freshman year. And I'm like, I think he's really catching up finally to the weight and the position.
Like you said, he was a quarterback, middle linebacker coming out of high school.
And I think you're going to see him, like, everything really come together for him athletically and technically this year. And I think he's going to take a step. So I think the floor of the room, because of what they went through and the guys that had to perform, and they did perform admirably. But I think they're just going to be better. I think Burnham's going to be better. Tuilamaka is going to be better. And you add in, we're not even talking about, we don't really expect to see a kid like Chris Burgess or Dominic Hulak. you'll see more of their impact probably on special teams.
And next season. Yeah.
Yeah, and next season. But I mean, heck, if injuries come and one of them gets a shot, they go in and they do what they have to do. But I think it's going to be very difficult, Bryan. I will say this for this defensive line collectively. Riley Mills getting hurt, I don't care what anybody says, Riley Mills getting hurt allowed offensive coordinators to exhale.
Yeah.
I don't care what anybody says. It allowed them to put a game plan together saying, we don't have to worry about that dude, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you might not have a Riley Mills, but just from a consistency standpoint, I don't think, barring just injuries equal to last year, I don't think you can look at this defensive line, unit 1, unit 2, however you want to break it down, whoever's coming in, that combination is going to be able to get the job done, whether it's stopping the run or applying pressure in the pass game. Yep. I think they're going to have consistency in all of the groups they put out there, even if they you start talking in passing situations. We saw Preston Zinter come off the edge in the blue and gold game. KBA is going to be brought off the edge and is going to improve as a pass rusher. What they're going to be able to do as a defensive line, I think they're going to have great consistency and little drop off. I think that's something that you trade for not having that high end guy like Riley Mills. If you could trade that to have consistency throughout from a depth standpoint, you rock and roll with that. And then I didn't even mention Logan Thomas, which you saw how he was in special teams. Him and Bryce Young in special teams. If they bring that athleticism with technicality and learning the position, I expect this pass rush. You talked me off the ledge because I thought it might be a problem area, and I was basing it based upon the Penn State game and then the Ohio State game.
Sure.
But really just looking at it big picture and being objective about it, I do think it ended up being one of the strengths of the team.
Because, you didn't have your best pass rusher in that game.
Yeah.
You didn't. Logan Thomas was a 205-pound true freshman. Josh Burnham was in his first full season playing defensive line. There's a lot of things. Bryce Young was a true freshman. He's now 25 pounds bigger. And so I also think they're better prepared to handle injuries for those reasons this year as well. Obviously Patel will come back some point in time later in the year, and I think he'll give you a pass rush whenever he returns. Special K in the chat keeps talking about Jalen Snead, and I understand where you're coming from. And his comment is, he goes, I think Snead might lead the team in pressures and sacks. That would concern me. And has nothing to do with Jalen Snead at all. It has to do with, if your leader in sacks and pressures is a guy who only rushes the quarterback on third down, that means your D-line's not getting a lot of pressure on the quarterback on a consistent basis. That's a problem. It's not even a pushback on Special K thinking that Jalen Snead can be a really good pass rusher. It's not that at all. But look, Notre Dame has the number 2 title odds on FanDuel to win it, to go undefeated, I should say, and top 10 title odds. If that's going to happen, they need guys up front to be able to get after the quarterback. Because when you've got to blitz somebody on third down, that means somebody from the secondary has to protect them. And that's when you expose yourself to bigger play opportunities like we saw in that 3rd and 11. I'd much rather go cover 2, over the top, jam Jeremiah Smith off the line, help him over the top, and then say, hey, Boubacar, Burnham, and Jalen Snead, get after it. But if it's just Jalen Snead, who's barely 230 pounds, that's not where you want to be. You're going to need somebody up front, at least one guy up front, to be that guy to where on that third down play, they're setting their protection to where Boubacar is, or to where Bryce is, or to where Burnham is, that type of thing. And then what that does, Shaun, is if that's where they are, now all of a sudden that creates better one-on-one opportunities for a Jalen Snead. For a Drake Bowen on a blitz, for a secondary pass rusher You know, if they're setting their pressure to Boubacar, good luck blocking Bryce or Burnham or Logan Thomas. That's why I think you need that guy to step up front. But if you want to keep focusing on Jalen Sneed, that's fine. But that's one down that you're bringing Jalen Sneed. If he's leading your team in sacks and pressures, that means your D-line's not getting a lot of pressure on the quarterback in first and second down. That's a problem. That's a major problem. That's why it's got to be an edge guy, that at least one edge guy that's got to really step up and take his game to that level. And if they do that, then the second level pressures, the nickel pressures become way more impactful because you have to focus so much on stopping that front. That's where I'm coming from. And
I actually made a prediction. I actually said 2 guys on the defensive line will get over 5 sacks.
Oh, I definitely think it'll a defensive end or defensive line.
Defensive end.
Defensive end, yeah, I agree with that. And now, could Jalen Sneed lead the defense in hits and sacks or sacks and pressures on a per snap, like a per pass rush basis? Sure. Yeah. But ideally, he's not rushing the quarterback as much as those other 2 guys are, or those edge players are, because they got to do it on first and second down. So that's where, that's where I would say I want to see them take their game to another level this season. They got to have that. I think that's the difference in being you a pretty good defense that can get you to the show or a defense that can win it. We saw last year the defense was good enough to get them to the big game, but it wasn't good enough in that game to stop a team like Ohio State. Just wasn't. Now, there's a lot of reasons why, but whatever the reasons, that's what was the reality. That's got to step up in this instance.
But it was a great point by you, just looking at it, just being fair. A very opportunistic defense, a very solid defense that had a strength in particular on the back end and was really talented in the middle. But, they couldn't really play to their capabilities, particularly in the middle of the defense, because of some of the deficiencies that were brought along by injuries and other things up front. And so you look for all of that. Once again, collaborative. It goes back to what we talked about, offense. All 3 levels working together and just complementing each other and helping each other play at an elite level. That, if they can do that, I think they can really become that championship defense that you're talking about.
Shaun, let's go to, we kind of handled the front 2 levels, or the front level. We're going to skip the second level because I expect, like, Kingston's one of my potential breakout players. Jaden Osborne could be a breakout player. Jalen Sneed could be a breakout player. People could make a case that Drake Bowen's going to become a breakout from a really good player, which is what he was most of last year, to a star. That's all fine. They don't need it. If the linebackers simply are just a more experienced, which means more like less mistakes version of last year, Notre Dame's got an outstanding linebacker room. If they just get last year's guys that make fewer mistakes, that's it. Not an ounce better outside of make fewer mistakes. They're fine. The point is, this is a show about who they need to break out. I don't think they need any of the linebackers to be anything better than just more disciplined versions of what they were last year. Agree with that? All right. So now let's go to the third level. And this is where I think you can make a case for a couple of guys that they need to take steps. I'm going to kick things off with Bronte Johnson. And now I actually think that multiple DB safeties need to step up opposite of Adon Schuler, because you need a starter, you need rotation guys, you need all that. So you could talk about Luke Talent, you could talk about Jadon Blair also needing to step up, but a guy that I think has a chance to be that huge difference maker is Tay Johnson. Like, I think when you look at Tay, you look at a guy that look, this is an intel piece that was out before camp started, so I'm going to give a little nugget from it, and this is why you should be on the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com, because you would have seen this the night before camp started. I put out an intel piece where I talked to a source close to the program, and they said to me that we think that Tay has ball skills like Xavier Watts. And I was like, seriously? And they're like, yes. So put that in the intel piece, Shaun, and it's out there. And first practice, we go out there and Tay picks off 2 passes. both rangy, instinctive plays. I know you're going to talk about Adon, and because you and I have talked about what you're going to say, and I agree with it. But no matter how much better Adon gets, I don't think he's the same kind of player as Xavier Watts for two reasons: stylistically, but also the boundary safety is different in pass coverage than what they ask of the field safety. And if you get a guy like Tay Johnson that can do with any kind of consistency what he did in practice on day one, and I don't mean pick off 2 passes, I just mean be around the ball, be where you're supposed to be athletic, do all those things. He's the guy that has a chance to this year become a breakout star, similar to what Adon did last year, if not maybe even a little bit more productive as a redshirt freshman. And of the options, I think it's more likely that he breaks out to become that kind of player, with then Jadon becoming a really good part of the rotation as a true freshman, as opposed to Jadon becoming a star as a true freshman. But I think you need Tay to have that breakout. I think him stepping up and being that difference maker, or being a difference maker on the ball, is the difference between Notre Dame having a really good secondary and an elite secondary, especially at safety. And I think Tay Johnson can have that type of impact in the pass game. And then you need somebody as part of that rotation, whether it's Luke Talich, whether it's Jalen Stroman, whether it's Jadon Blair, I don't care if it's Ethan Long, I don't care who it is, somebody else needs to step up as that third or fourth safety to provide great depth. So there's a breakout needed from everybody not named Adon Schuler, in my view. And I'm because I'm looking at it differently. You're going to talk about Adon here in a second. But somebody needs to take an even bigger step. And I think Tay is the guy with the tools to do that. And so if he breaks out, it's just going to be on a different level than if Luke or Jalen or another returner breaks out. I just think he's got that kind of talent. I mean, Sean Adams is a top 100 recruit with 5-star upside. Like, he hasn't done anything. I mean, when they needed a corner last year, they moved Tay to corner, and he looked pretty good when he was doing it in mop-up minutes late in games. So I think he's got a chance to be a special player. I don't need him to be that necessarily this year, but the closer he gets to that and breaks out, the better this secondary is going to be.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think for me, talking about Adon Schuler, I make the correlation not in talent or not in position, but in leadership, right? We talked about transition and the standard of the room, the standard of the position, how you lead, how you play. I think that's something that Xavier Watts, and I think Adon Schuler said it multiple times last year when people were talking about how well he's played as a first-time starter. He's like, man, I'm playing next to this guy. Speaking of Xavier Watts and learning from him makes it a whole lot easier to play and make plays. And so now he has to be that for those guys that you just talked about. Those young guys have to be able to look to him. He has to be the anchor. He has to be the extension of Mike Mickens on the field and the extension of Chris Ash on the field. He has to be the one, as Marcus Freeman spoke about Xavier Watts, he's always in the right place for us on every play. Adon Schuler, like he said, they play a different position. He has to be the guy to show everybody, like, yo, this is your job. Always be in the right spot. Whatever is asked of him, if he can do that, you know he's going to come downhill. You know he's going to hit. You know he's going to be physical. And you know he's going to make plays because he showed the knack for making plays and creating turnovers last year. I expect that to take another step. But I think from a leadership standpoint, filling that void of who Xavier Watts was for that defense, he doesn't have to be Xavier Watts because he's not Xavier Watts. But he has to be that type of presence and leader on the back end to go ahead and help facilitate what you spoke about with Bronte and the other youngsters at the safety position being able to break out.
I think that point is because I would say as a player that he's no different than the linebackers in that I just need you to be a little bit more disciplined version of what you were last year. Solid in coverage and man, pretty good in zone, really good coming down against the run, but he was prone to young guy mistakes. He'd go out of control. He'd take a bad angle. Like, those are areas where if he just cleans that up, he's a heck of a player. To your point, where he needs to be a breakout is what he provides the room from a leadership, setting the example, setting the tone, getting people lined up, making sure that everyone knows what's going on. When there's a motion, making sure that if your nickel's making a call, he's making the right call, things like that. I think that's an invaluable piece of what Adon's going to have to bring this year. That's going to go way beyond whatever he does production-wise. I think that's absolutely a great example, Shaun. I think we could also make a case for Christian Gray in this scenario, because I just don't know if I need him to break out. I want to get your thoughts on this. I think Christian Gray had a very interesting year in 2024. There were times he was outstanding, and there were times he struggled. The times he struggled were usually moments within a game, not for an entire game. The one example being the game against USC. I think he struggled for a chunk of that game. Ohio State, I could show you some really good coverage snaps from that game from him. Just had a couple bad ones. And well, really just the one. I don't fault him for the play where Ohio State ran that motion reverse. There just was bad communication all around on that play. But what I do think they need is minimum what I said about Adon Schuler and linebackers. I just need you to be consistently the best version of yourself. When you look around college football this year, Shaun, and the teams in Notre Dame is going to have to beat to win a title, do you think that even more is needed from Christian? Or do you think it can just be I just need you to be what you are 75% of the time, 90% of the time? Or do you think it's more of no, I need you to really raise your overall level of play? Does that make sense? Like, what I mean is 75% of the time last year, Christian was really good. I need him to be that guy 90% of the time, 95% of the time, meaning fewer mistakes. Don't be so grabby when you're in great position. Like, things like that. I don't think he needs to elevate his game all around. It's just, dude, be more consistent. So I put him on the same level as I do the Drake Bowens and the Kingstons and the Jaden Alsburys and the Adon Schulers, where I don't need a breakout per se. I think more consistency just naturally does that, where it's not so much you're here, now you got to go here, like we're talking about from other guys. I think, dude, you're here most of the time. I just need you to stop being here for 15% of the time, 20% of the time. Or what do you think, Shaun? Or do you think a breakout's actually needed?
I think two things. I do think that some of his struggle comes from the fact that he is extreme. He studies the game. And I think that's something as a coach. You know how you come in and guys think they know what studying is?
Yes. Can you Shaun, can you do me a favor right there?
Yeah.
Can you now share, you don't have to say who told you that, but can you now share what you were told going into last season about Christian? Because I think it fits really well with because I remember when you told me, it was later at night and I was taking the trash. I remember you having that conversation, who we were talking about. Yeah. But can you share that story? Because I think it fits perfectly into what you're saying right now about Christian.
Yeah, it was a conversation with Benjamin Morrison's dad. And Benjamin Morrison's dad pretty much was like, yo, Christian he's more talented than Ben. He's just not as technical, and he doesn't work as hard as Ben, but he'll learn. And that's what I was getting to. You can come in and you can think you know what film work is, what film study is, but there's another level to it, right? And Christian, I think, had to learn that lesson the hard way, with some unfortunate big plays made against him later in the season, right? And what I mean by that is he studies, and in his studying, he can gamble a lot because he trusts in what he sees. If you know, Christian is always talking to everybody else pre-snap about what he sees. He's looking at the way this guy has this foot up, this receiver has this foot up. He's always looking at on the play you mentioned against Ohio State. He's the one trying to get everybody else's attention to say, hey, something going on. He's looking at Jeremiah Smith saying something's going on here. I see it. And no one else caught his attention, but that's just Chip Kelly knowing they're going to be in man and we can use this against them, which goes to my next point. I think the benefit that Chris Ash can give to Christian Gray and Leonard Moore is to give them the ability to disguise, to be up as if they're going to bump and run, but be in cover 3 or drop late or do different things that can give them the ability and help them be even better and more efficient at what they do. We know for the vast majority of the snaps, if you just let them line up man to man, they're going to have good snaps. But it's always those 1 or 2 snaps per game that everybody wants to point out and highlight. And like you said, what about the other 85, 90% of the snaps or passes where he did a great job in coverage? And so I think the ability to be more multiple, which is going to help with their development, with their desire to go to the next level. And he likes to play. We always question, like, should he play more bump and run or does he like to play more off?
Yeah.
And I think because he did gamble a lot, he would get caught off in off-man coverage, which that was the one thing I didn't like about the play against Ohio State.
Right.
Like,
he should have been bumping and running on.
Just let him bump and run.
Right.
Let him bump and run. The moment you put him in off coverage in that position, he has to worry about the slant or in breaking route, and he has to worry about
that. To your point, is why mixing up some zone is good, because Christian is really good playing off-man coverage against quick game and intermediate game because he's really smart and instinctive. That's why he was driving on balls. Where Christian gets in trouble is when he's got to flip his hips on vertical stuff in off man, which is exactly what got him beat against USC, and it's what got him beat against Ohio State. He's got to improve in that area, first of all.
But that goes to the technical part of the game.
Right.
Which Mr. Morrison was talking about. Like, once he locks in and hones in on his craft.
Now, keep in mind, Benjamin Morrison's dad is not just some dad who's evaluating his own son. Benjamin Morrison's dad, I believe, was an all Pac-12 defensive back and played in the NFL as a safety. So that's why it has a little bit more credibility for him to say that about a killer. And he wasn't saying Christian doesn't work. He was saying Christian doesn't work like Benjamin. Point being, if Christian can then work like Benjamin, he could be a great player. I'll say this, Shaun. There's not a player on this roster who has a greater disparity between what the fans think of him and what the coaching staff thinks of him than Christian Gray. Because going into spring, we had people like, do you think so-and-so might beat out Christian Gray? And I'm thinking, no. Like, no. I said that to a Notre Dame coach and literally started laughing. Just like literally started laughing. Like, people actually think that? Like, do they not watch film? So we got to understand. And it made sense to him when I said that. So you got to understand, most fans are watching the game from television. So the only time you really see a corner is when he's picking a ball off or getting beat. That's usually the only time you notice a corner is then. Because, like, even if it's an incompletion, they kind of go away from it pretty quickly. And it's like, that makes sense. But what they think about him inside the program is so much different than what fans think of him. And Troy Pride was like that as well, where Troy had he was very highly thought of in the program by the coaches, but fans, like, for whatever reason, just, had that feeling of him. But like Christian Gray, if you study the film, is really good most of the time. It's just, as a young player, it's like that with Drake Bowen in Kingston last year. When they made mistakes, they were usually like big ones that we all saw. Kingston not running with that seam route against Northern Illinois and getting beat for an 85-yard touchdown. Kingston closing in and not recognizing read zone, and Tyler Shuck pulls it out the backside and runs for 50. I mean, Drake getting beat on a wheel route. It was plays like that, and they were noticeable. But then you watch the other 85, 90+% of plays, you're like, these guys are really good. it's cleaning up those plays where the mistakes are with a lot of these guys. But Christian's all fits into that as well. And they were all fresh. All those guys we're talking about were freshmen and sophomores last year. Think about that.
Yeah.
They're all freshmen and sophomores. And now it's about cleaning that up and taking it to another level.
You know, something else, I equate it to Dennis Johnson. I was going to use somebody else, but I know you're a Celtics fan.
Oh, you're talking about DJ, the great one. Okay, there we go.
DJ always had the assignment to stick Mike, right? Famous story. That famous series where you see Larry Bird refer to Michael Jordan as God. Game 1 of that series, Michael Jordan has like 30-some points. The Bulls get blown out. He goes and plays golf with Danny Ainge and a couple of Boston Celtics the next day. And he tells Danny Ainge, hey, tell DJ to be ready tomorrow. And that's when he came into the Garden and scored 63. Like, are you going to sit here and say DJ's a horrible defender? No, that dude is just different.
Right.
He's just different. And sometimes other good players make plays.
Yeah.
That catch the Indiana.
That was ridiculous. He literally caught it with his kneecaps.
Yes. Christian Gray is right there. He's literally right there with his hand.
But because of the
his
USC
arms.
game,
yes,
it was viewed, oh, well, you know,
yeah.
It's because of this, it's because of that, right?
Yeah. And you know DJ was a great defender. You know Dennis Johnson was a great defender. But yeah, that's just a great play by a great player. But I will say this. Who made the big time stop on 4th down against Texas A&M? Who made that big play when USC was trying to tie the game up? Who made the big play against Penn State? And then you can say what you want to say. For every play that you want to highlight is, oh, man, he has a list of big plays last season that he made as well. So, yeah, it's a little bit out over your skis to be sitting here talking about who's going to beat out Christian.
It's just sometimes, Shaun, it doesn't matter how good you are. You're just not going to be able to cover that guy. I mean, Larry Bird has said before, best guy that ever defended me is Michael Cooper. There's plenty of games where Larry Bird lit Michael Cooper up in the finals. You know, but it's not about it. But of all the people that have guarded me, this guy's the best at it. But, you know, it's like the one that's similar to me as a Celtics fan. You talk about the Bulls fan game. The Celtics swept that series, by the way. I like to point out that the Bulls never beat the Celtics when Larry Bird was still playing, when the big three was together. It's just a different story for a different day. But the game where Bird went for 60 against the Hawks, and Doc Rivers like, I guarded him, Dominique guarded him. I mean, it just didn't matter who you put on him. It's not that those guys couldn't play defenses that night. When a great player gets hot, there's just nothing you can do about it. It's just, I mean, I've seen that. I mean, Michael Jordan was one of the best defensive guards I've ever seen in the NBA. People don't talk about that enough. He was an elite defensive player. Did you watch what Bubba Chuck did to him a couple times? You know what I mean? Like, and when a great player, I don't care who you are, when a great player is going off, sometimes you're going to get beat. For Christian, it's about limiting those times, being more competitive, and getting to that point. So I would say that if he does have a breakout, I think it makes the secondary really, really scary. But I would still say if I could only pick Christian just being more consistent and a breakout coming from Tay, I'll go with that, because I still think Christian was already still pretty good most of the time anyway.
Yeah.
But one of my bold predictions, Shaun, was that Christian Gray is not on the team next year.
Ooh, that was
one of my bold predictions for the corners, because meaning he has a big year, and it's like
he has to go.
Yeah, like Dane Brugler released his looking at the 2026 draft. Somebody put on the message board, but Dane Brugler broke down his top 5 draft eligible corners at The Athletic today. But then he ranked the top 25 seniors, and then he ranked the top 15 draft eligible underclassmen, and he had Christian Gray 4th, ahead of AJ Harris, ahead of Malik Muhammad, ahead of D'Angelo Pons, ahead of Jermaine Matthews, ahead of Jalen Kilgore, like ahead of some pretty good players.
Yeah.
So like the talent is there. It's just about being more consistent with it. And if he is more consistent with it, I think he can have the kind of season where you look back and say, why is he leaving after his junior year? And like, well, because he's got 32 career starts, which is like 3 seasons for a lot of people,
Yeah.
and he's turned into an elite cornerback. So I think he's got that kind of tool. So, Shaun, that's going to do it for the defensive part of this show. Is there anybody else you wanted to mention before we move on to our final portion of the show?
No, I think I did mention, I do think because I expect Christian Gray and Leonard Moore to be elite, I think that nickel position is going to be key. Devontae Smith, Carson Hobbs. I think if they can be locked down, whether it's in, nickel or other sub situations, if they can be locked down on the interior of the defense against the pass, which from what we've seen in the spring and the short time that you guys gave a report, I think in the that's not shade. I'm just saying the one full practice that was
you're good.
that we were able to see. I do think it looks good because I think that's going to be a premium position because offensive coordinators is going to be trying to find where can we attack this defense, and more than likely they're going to look at that nickel position and inside the hashes.
So before we move on, Guns N' Roses said no special teams breakout for Vince. What's funny is Shaun asked me that question beforehand. Do you want to talk about any special? I said, no, not really, because I'm adopting the loose emoji view on special teams this year. I don't need anybody to be a star. Just do your job. Just don't make big mistakes. Just make your kicks, do your punts, be consistent as a punter, be good in coverage. I don't need a bunch of long returns. If somebody does, that's great, but I don't think they need it. I think special teams is just don't get the team beat on special teams. That's honestly all I care about because I think they're so good on all phases. Just don't give the game-changing plays for the other team on special teams. Missed field goals, blocked kicks, big returns, muffed punts, things like that. Don't give opponents those things, and I think it'll be.
Speaking of that, though, low key, I do think James Rendell has a chance to be special. When they just finally let him kick instead of trying to be tricky and do little things.
Well, I don't think they're going to let him just kick, number one. I think they're going to still do that other crap. I think there's a couple returners that could be special.
Yeah.
My point is I don't think they need it for this team to be an elite championship team.
It won't hurt.
No, it doesn't hurt.
It won't hurt at all.
It doesn't hurt if Drake Bowen has a breakout. It doesn't hurt if Kingston has a breakout. It doesn't hurt if Jeremiah Love has another. It won't hurt. It's just they don't need it is why I went there. But we did bring it up. And show a little bit of love for Vince and Guns N' Roses. So we'll get there for you guys. So we got a little something, but that's going to wrap up the Notre Dame team section. We're going to get into some Heisman conversation in the next part of the show. But before we do, folks, hit that. If you haven't already done so, hit that like button for us. If you've already done it, don't do it because then it unlikes it. We want you to keep that like on. So go ahead and hit that like button for us. We'd greatly appreciate it as we wrap up part 2 of today's Irish Breakdown podcast.